So my name is Andrea Merriam. I lead the community engagement team at PMD Alliance. And one of the things we really pride ourselves on is our commitment to innovation and listening to the voices in the community. And when we hear a great idea, we pride ourselves on being nimble and responsive and bringing that idea to reality, hopefully within 2 weeks or less. This one, I think it took a little bit longer than that. But yeah, but this, the genesis of this program was our connection with one of our physician advisors, Dr. Indu Subramanian, who's the director of the Southwest VA PADREC, and has a real commitment to integrative medicine. And those of you who joined us for our lunch with docs a couple months ago, you know, she kind of, I won't take words out of your mouth, Dr. Subramanian, but, you know, she talked about how yoga affected her personal life. And then that kind of, you know, triggered an interest into the intersection between, you know, things like yoga and other aspects of integrative medicine and Parkinson's and movement disorders. So with a lot of heavy lifting on her part, this series, wHolistic, is an intersection of movement disorder specialists, so the highest trained experts when it comes to movement disorders and neurology, who also have expertise and knowledge and a passion for aspects of integrative medicine. And I'm so excited to introduce both Dr. Subramanian and Dr. Duda. They are both at the VA, and I'll start, I'll just mention a couple things about Dr. Duda. So he's an associate professor of neurology at the VA. He's the director of the East Coast PADREC, which that acronym, gotta love all these acronyms, is the Parkinson's Disease Research, Education, and Clinical Center. That's what the VA calls it. And he is on the East Coast at the University of Pennsylvania, and also the co-director of the Center for Neurotrauma, Neurodegeneration, and Restoration at the VA Center and the University of Pennsylvania Department of Neurology. And you make your bio a mouthful, Dr. Duda. You sure are up to a lot. And like I mentioned, Dr. Subramanian is on the West Coast in Los Angeles and affiliated with UCLA as well as the VA. So now that all the impressive credentials are out there, I want to turn it over to Dr. Subramanian. And I kind of gave, you know, maybe the big picture backstory, but I'd love to kind of hear, you know, have you add, you know, your thoughts on the series wHolistic as a whole, and then also today's episode on nutrition.
Mm-hmm. So thank you all for joining us. It's always a pleasure, and I love this format so I can actually see people, because often we're doing teleconferences and we really don't know who's out there, and I love seeing shiny, happy faces of our patients and caregivers. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for setting this up. This has been sort of a passion for John, Dr. Duda, and I, and it's been wonderful to work with a co-director of one of these centers of excellence in the country who believes in a lot of the things that I do as well, that we have a lot that we offer in regular Western medicine in terms of motor symptom control and things like that, that it's important for Parkinson's patients to continue to see their Western trained doctors and to be honest and open about any interest in these other fields, but that integrative medicine perhaps has a number of things to offer in areas where we don't have good treatments in terms of non-motor symptoms for patients, as well as just sort of healthy lifestyle approaches that we can adopt from some of these other practices and use for day-to-day living, not just for our Parkinson's patients, but as caregivers and as people who are aging on this planet. And so I think a lot of these things are universal truths. And I think that what we hope to bring you through this series is our view as neurologists, and sometimes we may even include, John and I have a colleague who's a naturopathic doctor, So we may have some specialists that may not be just MDs that we incorporate in this series, just to give you a bit of a perspective of what us as Western trained doctors are open to in these integrative practices, and what we feel that the evidence shows, and what maybe you can take in your own lives. So that's what we hope to bring. John has a personal story, maybe he'll share it with us, about his sort of journey, just like I had a yoga story that I brought to you in my personal life, in which I felt I was helped by a certain sort of practice in my own life, and then brought it to my patients. I think John has found personal satisfaction and benefit from some of these nutritional practices for himself. And he and I can speak to not just these small areas, but I wanted to bring him to help you all understand what nutrition and diet have to do with improving your wellness and your approach to your Parkinson's symptoms and disease in general. So with that, and just as a global sort of thought process for the series, so I will ask also who they think would be experts to bring. And I think for the first year or two, we hope to do this quarterly, every 3 months, to bring you a specialist who has an interest maybe in acupuncture, maybe a naturopath, maybe in Tai Chi. We'll have to just see, and we would love to have your input as patients and caregivers as to what are hot topics for you as well. So if you want to write those in the comments to PMD Alliance or share that, that would be really helpful for us to guide, because we ultimately realize that 60% of Parkinson's patients are actually very interested in integrative medicine modalities and are doing these things, whether or not they talk to their Western trained doctors about this. And so we would like to bring something of value to you, and I applaud the PMD Alliance for being at the forefront of trying to offer things to patients that they really are seeking. So, so yeah, with that, I'll turn it over to John.
Thanks, Indu. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm unmuted now, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. And is the picture still okay? I kind of pulled it a little closer.
I see John. Where is John?
You probably have to scroll to the right. Or,
okay.
Does it look okay, Andrea?
It does.
Okay, great. So yeah, thanks for the nice introduction. Nutrition and Parkinson's disease is somewhat of a passion of mine. I began studying nutrition in depth about 10 years ago or so, when I got tired of waiting for the big breakthrough that was going to slow down Parkinson's disease progression. And we were starting to learn how exercise could probably affect the progression of the illness. And I thought that nutrition might be another way that people could fight back against the disorder. And I've been kind of teaching it and trying to live it myself as well ever since. We, at the Philadelphia VA, we also have what we call a brain wellness clinic, where we bring people in and just discuss lifestyle choices that can affect their brain health, from nutrition and exercise, sleep, stress management, things like that. And we always focus a fair amount on nutrition. So do you want me to go ahead and start and show some slides and do now, or?
Yeah.
Okay. So I will try to share my slides. Can you guys see those okay?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So if you look online, for those of you watching, and search my name, you'll find some other presentations that I've made in the last couple of years that include an in-depth discussion of how nutrition can affect Parkinson's disease, what we know about certain foods increasing the risk of Parkinson's disease, and maybe treating the symptoms. For this forum, I didn't want to go through a whole 45 minutes or 60 minutes of slides, so I just cut to the chase and took out the slides that and basically describe what I tell to my patients in the clinic and in the brain wellness clinic. And afterwards, if we have questions, I can try to explain some of the reasoning for what I recommend. I have a couple opening statements. I do believe that Parkinson's disease might be treated by increasing levels of antioxidant and anti-inflammatory compounds in your blood and brain. I don't know if you guys have talked about that with this group at all, but there are certain things that we believe are involved in what causes Parkinson's disease, and two of them are oxidation and inflammation. And there are innumerable compounds in plants that are antioxidative and anti-inflammatory. They mostly come from whole unprocessed foods, including fruits, vegetables, mushrooms, nuts, seeds, beans, legumes, whole grains, teas, and spices. And so that's what I recommend people eat. I mean, there's a wealth of information that shows that a whole food plant-based diet, which is pretty similar to a Mediterranean diet or a Mayan diet, is the healthiest for many other reasons, including most of the chronic diseases that we see in this society. And it makes sense to me that the same reasons that it's good for those conditions make it good for Parkinson's disease. Food is medicine. People spend outrageous amounts of money on supplements that have really not been proven to do anything. I think a lot of them. We can talk about that at other times. And to be fair, there's no more evidence for a healthy nutritional choice than for some of the supplements. But number one, you know what you're getting when you buy a head of broccoli. When you buy a broccoli supplement in a tablet or something, you really don't know what you're getting, or any other supplement. I do remind people in the beginning that eating is an important part of our daily life satisfaction. So eat what you eat. Eat what you have to eat to be happy. If you have to have a cheeseburger with bacon and whatever every once in a while to be happy, then eat it. I don't think it makes any sense to live a long life if you're miserable the whole time. But eat those things as a treat, not as a staple, and don't eat them all the time. Eat the food that's healthier for you more of the time. And like most things regarding lifestyle changes, habits are hard to change, and it takes time, and you can't get frustrated. And if you slip up, don't worry about it. But every lifestyle change that you make over time gradually increases to major changes. So just choosing one thing to add into your diet or take out of your diet at a time is a good strategy. Obviously, anything I say here is kind of for educational purposes. I'm not making a prescription for any individual patient, and so that if you want to do these things and make major changes, then obviously consult your own physician. I'm not sure what that was, but I'll keep going until somebody tells me to stop. All these compounds that you see here are found in plants and likely have a lot of the same effects that a lot of the chemicals we're trying to slow down Parkinson's disease progression do. It's very hard to prove because it takes a lot of money to prove something like that, and the cherry lobby only has so much money to do research. I'm kidding; they have no money to do research. So testing a lot of these things is not going to happen anytime soon. But they are loaded with phytochemicals, which are phyto meaning green chemicals, phytochemicals that come from plants, and many of them have really remarkable properties. So here's the recommendations. Try to eat at least 7 to 9 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. And that's kind of the standard American Medical Association recommendation, and the vast majority of Americans don't do that. Eating lots of berries and fruits are a good choice. Berries in particular, they're loaded with things like anthocyanins and other things that have lots of antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties. But basically any whole fresh fruit or berries you like are a good choice. And frozen and dried fruits and berries are also a good option. They retain a lot of their nutritional value even that way. leafy greens are something that most people don't eat enough of, and there's all kinds, and basically whichever kind you like, and we'll eat that kind. But obviously, it helps to eat a variety. So mixing it up from time to time, not having spinach every day, but mixing in some of the other dark leafy greens, and cruciferous vegetables are another great choice, and those include broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, collards, kale, Brussels sprouts. A lot of the things that you hear a lot about in the news for a lot of other disorders are probably a good choice for Parkinson's disease as well. Allium vegetables, including onions, shallots, garlics, spring onions, are good. And interestingly, both the cruciferous vegetables and the allium vegetables should be cut up and let to sit for a couple of minutes before steaming or microwaving, or however you're going to cook them, because cutting up these cell walls joins a couple different compounds to make special compounds that aren't there if you cook them first. So if you cut them up, these compounds are made and then they're heat stable. So for both of those groups, cut them up first and let them sit around a bit. The more, we always say to eat the rainbow. There are obviously all kinds of different colors of fruits and vegetables. And mostly those colors are actually the compounds that have the anti-inflammatory and antioxidative properties. So eat a lot of different colors and a lot of, make your plate a very colorful plate. There's different ways to cook things. Some things are better raw, some things are better cooked, some things are better microwaved, some things are better baked, but for the most part, steaming, microwaving are good choices for just about everything. Cooking at high heat will tend to decrease the nutritive value of a lot of fruits and vegetables. If you're having a salad or vegetables, make sure to have some kind of source of healthy fat. A lot of phytonutrients are fat soluble, so you won't absorb them very well unless you include some fat in the meal. So you can use a good oil like olive oil, extra virgin olive oil or something, but you can also use whole food sources of fats like almonds, flax seeds, walnuts, sunflower seeds, tahini. All those things include a fair amount of fat and will help absorb those fat-soluble vitamins in your fruits and vegetables. Drink more liquid. I think most of my patients are kind of chronically dehydrated until I talk to them about it. It probably contributes to the constipation a lot of people have, and other symptoms. So drink more, and almost anything, any kind of tea you can think of is good. Obviously we don't want to be drinking soda or clear fruit juice if we can, and dairy fairly convincingly increases your risk of Parkinson's disease. Whether or not once you get Parkinson's disease, cutting out dairy will make any effect, we don't really know yet, but it makes sense to me. And coffee is just seed soup, right? It's just seeds that are boiled in a soup, so it's fine and may actually decrease some of your symptoms. And remember, making teas, you don't have to boil the water and put the tea in everything. You could just take just about any kind of tea, throw it in a pitcher or a container of water, and come back after a couple hours overnight, and you've got some nice tea there. So it's a lot easier than people think. Spices and herbs are powerhouses of nutrition. They're loaded with phytonutrients that decrease oxidation and inflammation. And just about any spice and herb you can think of are good for you for different reasons. And so eat a lot more of them, eat a lot better variety, try traditional blends of spices that you haven't tried before. Some of the spices even have monoamine oxidase inhibitors, which is what rasagiline and selegiline are. So may actually inhibit some of the metabolism of levodopa in your brain. Nuts and seeds are another thing that most Americans don't eat enough of. You have to be careful because they are high in calories, but if you have trouble maintaining your weight, which some people with Parkinson's disease do, then by all means eat a lot of nuts and seeds because they're a good source of calories for people who are losing weight. normal people should eat, a handful or two of nuts and seeds a day to supplement their fiber content and omega-3 fatty acids and lignans and all kinds of stuff. And if you're going to make one change in your diet from this talk, then I would say add a tablespoon or two of ground flax seeds every day. They're loaded with fiber and lignans and omega-3 fatty acids. They don't taste like much, so you can add them to just about anything. And they're cheaper than a lot of other seeds and nuts. Mushrooms are good. There's a compound in mushrooms called ergothioneine, which is a lot like glutathione, and we think it's a strong antioxidant in the brain. And we used to get it because we ate a lot of dirt in unclean foods. We don't eat much dirt anymore, so you have to get your ergothioneine from mushrooms, and just about any mushroom has them. For the most part, eat mushrooms cooked. Raw mushrooms do have some compounds that probably aren't so good for you. If you want to eat fish, then Pacific Coast wild-caught salmon and other small fatty fishes like mackerel, anchovies, and sardines are good choices. For the most part, people want to eat fish to increase their omega-3 fatty acids. And these fish that are the fatty fishes are loaded with them, so they're good choices. Now, if you don't want to eat fish because you're worried about the pollution that comes with eating most fish, then you can take omega-3 fatty acid supplements that are derived from algae, because fish actually don't make omega-3 fatty acids. They consume them from algae, and they're accumulated up the food chain. One other thing that I often talk about in clinic is that people don't eat enough legumes, which includes beans, lentils, soy products, chickpeas, and there's now all kinds of products, obviously, in every grocery store that are more or less processed from these types of beans. I, in general, like to encourage people to eat the whole natural bean in any way they like, but things like hummus, obviously, just taking some chickpeas and grinding them up with some ground up sesame seeds, which is tahini, and some other things, is a good choice. But basically any kind of bean or bean product that you like is a good choice, because they're loaded with fiber, a good source of plant-based protein, and many other things. So one other thing that most people don't get enough of. If you're going to eat grains, then try to eat as much whole grain as possible. And ideally, you eat, oatmeal, brown rice, quinoa, farros, or that in their whole form. If not, then at least go with 100% whole grain products like whole wheat pasta, whole wheat bread, and it has to say 100%. Otherwise, they could just, if it says a whole wheat bread, it could have 2% whole wheat, and they can get away with it. And the problem with eating processed grains is you're stripping away most of the good phytonutrients when you process them, from the fiber to the proteins that are included. That's why we have to enrich flour, because we take away all the good stuff and we have to put it back. But it's a better idea just to eat the grains that have all the good stuff with them in the first place. Try to eat enough dietary fiber to have a bowel movement a day. I mean, most people with Parkinson's disease have problems with constipation. And I believe we've done a small study in our VA showing that if you increase the amount of whole plant foods you eat, most people do increase their bowel movement frequency, and you can, get off your laxatives and stool softeners and things. And obviously there's a million choices on sources of fiber that can help you do that. If you want to, a lot of people know that a hot topic in medicine and in Parkinson's disease as well recently has been the gut microbiome and using probiotics and prebiotics. I'm not a huge fan of probiotics that are pre-made bacteria in little pills and everything. The bacteria that they're adding are good, but they're probably not the best ones. And if you don't feed those good bacteria what they eat, they're going to die anyway. So the idea is to use prebiotics, which is the foods that good bacteria eat, which is mostly plant-based foods that contain a lot of fiber that makes it down into your gut, and they can proliferate and prosper. You can also try eating some probiotic foods like sauerkraut and kimchi and kombucha and everything. Although again, there's one study that suggests it may be helpful for Parkinson's disease, but it's hard to say how much benefit you'll get from these. If you do become a vegan, meaning giving up all meat, poultry, and dairy and fish, you do have to worry about B12 because it's tough to get it from a completely plant-based diet. However, most people are B12 deficient anyway, so I recommend you have your physician check your B12 levels and something called homocysteine, which is a byproduct of B12 metabolism that can affect your brain health. So have your physician check B12 and homocysteine. Sorry, I didn't include that in the slide. And then vitamin D is insufficiency or deficiency is highly prevalent in Parkinson's disease. Almost everybody I check with Parkinson's disease has low levels of vitamin D. So get that checked and supplement up to, I recommend up to a 25-hydroxydopamine level of 50 to 70, which is higher than a lot of people recommend, although the levels that are recommended are just to prevent rickets, which is the disease you get if you don't have enough vitamin D. And I don't want to get rickets, but I also want to get the full benefit of vitamin D in my brain and body, and I think that requires higher levels than that. What about organics? So people worry about organic foods and pesticides and Parkinson's disease, and I think that's reasonable to do. I don't recommend eating a completely organic diet. I don't think it's really justified. And what I do recommend is going to the Environmental Working Group, which looks at fresh produce, fruits and vegetables and things, and figures out which crops use a lot of pesticides and which crops do you consume those pesticides. So something like pineapple might use a ton of pesticides, but nobody eats the rind of a pineapple, and that's where a lot of the pesticides end up. So if it's a fruit or vegetable that has a thick skin that you don't eat, then it's maybe not as necessary to try and find an organic source. However, there are certain things that they do recommend eating organic, and they came out with a Clean 15, which is 15 things that you don't have to worry about eating organic, and a Dirty Dozen. But actually, they have a full list of 51 items, and this is just the ranking. So the top ones, number 1 through 12, is the Dirty Dozen, and those are ones, if possible, you want to try to find organic sources. The lower rated ones in the lower numbers are ones that you don't have to worry about. Like I said, cauliflower, we don't actually use much pesticides in cauliflower. Mangoes, has a thick skin, so you don't eat that. But you can take a look at this list, and you can find the whole thing at the Environmental Working Group, and use that to guide whether or not to use organic sources. Most of all, just relax. Fighting back against Parkinson's disease by exercising and eating right and everything is really empowering, and I do encourage you to do it. But if you can't do everything, or you don't want to do everything, that's perfectly fine. It's your life. Live your life the way you want to live it. Just be aware that it probably will, in my anecdotal experience and in some clinical studies, people do better if they eat a whole food plant-based diet and have Parkinson's disease. It decreases the risk of dementia. It improves constipation. There's all kinds of benefits. I don't know everything, obviously. These are just my opinions. So continue to educate yourself about health and wellness. And these are some sources for nutrition and wellness. And there's all kinds of places online. Obviously, some are better than others, but there's one called nutritionfacts.org, which I highly recommend as a source. And there's some other sources as well there. And finally, you can't read these, but hopefully this we put up in online somewhere, where some other websites that I think have good choices for whole food plant-based recipes, and recommendations on what to eat to be healthy. That's it. There are some, how do I stop sharing here? There are some side effects. I took out one slide to a whole food plant-based diet. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to get back. Oh, there we go. Thank you. There are some whole foods that can interfere with some medications, in particular blood thinners. So if you're thinking about changing your diet dramatically, keep that in mind. You have to go slowly, increasing the amount of fiber in your diet, or you could get bloating and indigestion. And then there are a ton of side effects that really aren't so bad, like less cancer, less heart disease, less hypertension, less diabetes, less osteoporosis, less kidney stones, just about anything you can think of. There are improvements that you can do with diet, and the same thing that decrease the risk or improve all those conditions, hopefully also slow down the progression of your Parkinson's disease, but certainly will decrease your risk of getting a lot of the symptoms. So I will stop there and open it up to questions. I don't know, and do a few.
Yeah, I'll take the ball from here. So thank you so much. I think that was a really nice sort of overview and some real solid tips to incorporate, hopefully, for some of our viewers and myself even. So thank you for that, John. And I think that Andrea has shared some links here of some of the charts and the other information. So I think that, I covered a lot. There have already been some questions generated on the chat, and, you can feel free to put more of those in, and we'll try to cover some of those. One of the questions that has come up is, I can't barely taste or smell anymore, so eating has lost a lot of pleasures. I used to love eating watermelon this time of year, but now I'm not drawn to it and stick to things like Cliff Bars and Ensure. Do you have any ideas?
Sure. Great point. Most people with Parkinson's disease do lose their sense of smell, and a lot of your sense of taste actually is smell. So what I recommend is that you load up on spices and herbs to really make it more flavorful. You probably haven't completely lost your sense of smell, and if you just overwhelm your olfactory receptors and taste buds, you can hopefully enjoy your food a little bit more.
Yeah, I do the same. I tell my
Can you
patients.
share the presentation with those of us that are attending today?
I don't know who asked that. Can we share the presentation for those of you attending today? I know that this will be videotaped and put on the YouTube site, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
We are recording, and we will put it on the website and our YouTube channel in about a day. And I can tell there are a lot of eager questions out there. So if everyone could just be a little bit patient, and when everyone unmutes themselves and asks a question at the same time, it gets a little hairy. So let's try. Yeah, let's try. And then if I have to, I'll put you all on forced mute and then unmute you when it's time. But I think that we might be able to navigate some of the live questions, which I know, Dr. Subramanian, you like, because then we can actually, talk to people. So I did know that, I believe it's Asia. If you want to go ahead with your question.
Okay, so my question is, what is the role of eating a diet heavy in meats in terms of Parkinson's and other dementias?
Good question. So,
do you want to repeat the question, John?
Sure. The question was, what do we know about eating meat and Parkinson's disease and other dementias? So there are a lot of studies and a lot of rationales that suggest that a more plant-based diet with less meat, something like a Mediterranean diet or a Mind diet or a whole food plant-based diet, actually decrease your risk of most chronic diseases, including dementia, heart disease, hypertension, diabetes. I'm not aware of any well-done study that suggests that adding meat to a whole food plant-based diet actually decreases your risk of any condition. So, obviously, people enjoy eating meat at times, and for health purposes, there's no reason to eat meat. If you do it for pleasure, sure, but there are a lot of diets out there that focus on meat consumption, like the paleo diet and Atkins diet and everything, and they're good. Some of them are good for weight loss, but for prevention and treatment of chronic diseases, they've been pretty well shown to have detrimental effects.
Thank you, Dr. Doodle.
You're welcome.
So maybe we'll take another one of the questions from the chat, the group chat. So somebody has asked, I've been told that although nuts are high in calories, we seldom thoroughly digest them. So some of these calories aren't absorbed. Is that true?
Yeah, that is true, and it's a good question. Actually, there was a good study looking at weight loss, and all they did was ask the participants to eat a handful of nuts a day, added to their regular diet, and they actually lost weight. And there's a couple of reasons why people think that is. Number one, you're right. You don't absorb all the calories from nuts because we don't usually chew them up enough, and some of that makes it down to our gut and either feeds the bacteria in our gut or ends up coming out. The fat in nuts actually probably curbs your appetite at times, so you don't feel like you don't need as much of other things. But it's true that a handful or two of nuts is a good thing. If you're losing calories, then eating plenty more. But if you're eating cups and cups of nuts and seeds a day, you can certainly get too many calories pretty quickly.
Yeah, so a handful, like what would fit in my hand?
Yeah.
And then do you want to talk about which, just again, maybe 3 or 4 types of nuts that you would highly most recommend or whatever, John?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think walnuts are a great choice. We eat nuts mostly for omega-3 fatty acids and protein and some other healthy phytonutrients. But I think cashews, walnuts, hazelnuts, almonds are okay. I personally have a problem with the environmental impact of almonds. Peanuts are okay. They're not technically a nut, but in moderation, they're like in between a bean and a nut. But like I said, pretty much any nut that you like is okay. You can't eat too many Brazil nuts. It's the only one that I'm aware of that, because of the content of selenium in Brazil nuts, you shouldn't be eating whole handfuls of Brazil nuts every day.
Fair enough. You want to go to another live one, Andrea? Is there one? Maybe I should find that. I'll ask another question. So someone had sent in a question about, I grow my own vegetables, and that is the best way to eat healthy, in my opinion. Do we agree as doctors?
I'm unmuted. Good. Yeah, I agree completely. Obviously, there are many advantages to growing your own food, not just the exercise you get, but being outdoors and a sense of accomplishment and everything. And then, presuming you're not using a ton of pesticides, they're organic for the most part, and a great choice. So good for you, and keep it up.
And there has been even some studies in the world of integrative medicine that are coming out that being in nature and even the chemicals of touching soil, touching plants, being in trees, whatever these chemicals are that we're breathing in and being around, in forests and in gardens is actually good for people as we age and for us to function. There's some sense that those chemicals, not even just eating them, but being around them and touching them in the soil, may be of some healthy benefits. So I think the gardening is very pleasurable for many people, and I would encourage people to do that.
That's a good point. We call it forest bathing. There's, you can Google that, and there's whole books about it. And I think, there's something to it, that being in nature is good for us.
Plus, you mentioned we don't get enough dirt. I would think if you're gardening and growing vegetables, you're eating more dirt too.
If you have a good source of healthy organic foods, then don't be compulsive about cleaning them. There are actually innumerable nutrients in dirt, not just the good bacteria, but all kinds of other minerals, obviously, and other compounds that we don't get enough of anymore. And we evolved eating dirt, so we evolved in certain ways that expect us to eat dirt, and when we don't, it probably affects us in many ways.
Great. Okay. And the one thing about gardening, especially because I know a lot of our participants are in some of the Southwest areas, Arizona, New Mexico, California. Remember that with Parkinson's disease, sometimes our blood pressure can get low in the heat. So probably stay out of midday heat if you're going to be in the garden. Try to stay in cooler, shaded areas. Stay hydrated. So, and if you're going to go from sitting down for a long time gardening to standing up quickly, again, be mindful of possibly falling down or feeling woozy from that blood pressure dysregulation. You guys don't need to necessarily worry about that year-round, John, but some of us in the warmer climates are a little bit, sort of worried about that in our patients. So be careful.
Yeah, great point. Obviously, as I mentioned before, most people with PD don't drink enough fluid, and so keeping that in mind. And there's different recommendations, but 48 to 64 ounces a day in the Southwest heat, probably at least 64 ounces. But you want to drink enough fluid so that you maintain a light straw color to your urine. You don't want to concentrate your urine, and obviously staying hydrated, like you said, does help prevent getting lightheaded when you stand up.
Great. Andrea, was there another live one that you wanted to do, or just let me know when you do and I can keep going through the typed questions?
Sure. I think Jane Sipe, if I'm pronouncing that right, I've unmuted you. I think you had a question earlier. If you want to go ahead.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was asking about the use of magnesium for constipation and as well as muscle cramps.
Good question. The question was the use of magnesium for constipation and muscle cramps. Obviously, milk of magnesia can be helpful for some people with constipation. The cramping story, there was a study that didn't show much of a benefit. I do sometimes recommend people try it because I think on an individual level, sometimes it can be helpful. But unfortunately, it wasn't really proven in a controlled study. Cramps are a big problem for a lot of people with Parkinson's disease, and there's all kinds of home remedies, some of which with, putting a bar of soap in your bed sheets at night sometimes helps. Often Parkinson's disease patients who get cramps in their legs at night are just wearing off, so taking a long-acting form of Cinemat at bedtime can sometimes help. And then I know that some people who study lithium believe that a lot of people are lithium deficient, and that supplementing your lithium with low doses of lithium, like 5 to 20 milligrams a day, can help with cramps as well. And I have had some experience with people benefiting from that. But it's worth trying magnesium as well. But it just doesn't always work for everybody.
And then some foods that are rich in magnesium are, I just looked it up to remind myself. So again, the leafy green vegetables, kale, kelp, seaweed kind of things, beans, nuts, and seeds.
Yeah,
And
nuts and seeds are a great source.
quinoa as well. So you have some dietary sources. And then just, again, the hydration, because sometimes people get dehydrated and can get some cramping from that as well. So, so then a question from Denise: would peeling non-organic apples help? Isn't the skin good for you too?
Yeah, good question. So remember, in most fruits and vegetables, the colorful part is where a lot of the phytonutrients are. So in apples, the skin does include most of, or a lot of the good nutrients. And if you're eating non-organic apples, I guess it's a toss-up, right? Because if you peel them, you are getting rid of the pesticides, but you're also getting rid of a lot of the phytonutrients. So it's hard to say, which one is better. I think obviously if you can find organic, and remember, just because it's organic doesn't mean they're not using pesticides. There are a number of pesticides that are allowed in organic agriculture. So you should be washing fruits and vegetables that are organically grown as well. But yeah, in general, like the potato skin is healthy. A lot of skins are a good source of fiber and nutrients. So in general, you want to eat as many as possible.
Judy has a suggestion for everyone for a seasoning for fruits and veggies, tagine. It's available, oh, big bottle there, in the produce section of the supermarket. So for people who may be losing some taste, maybe spicing it up with something like that. I like that stuff too, it's good. So that's also a consideration.
It's got tons of salt.
I don't know if it's out tagine or tahine, I'm not sure. Okay. And then there's been a couple of questions about nut allergies. I don't know, I am not the allergy queen, but maybe John, you might have some ideas. So one question was, what do I do if I'm allergic to nuts? And then there's another follow-up question, I'm allergic to walnuts, are pecans similar?
So I am not an authority on food allergies either. I think obviously if you're allergic to nuts, then you don't want to be eating nuts. I would consult an allergist, but there is some cross-reactivity between nuts because some of the compounds that are allergenic are found in different kinds of nuts. So I wouldn't go testing that until you speak to someone with a little more experience with that. I think it's rare to be allergic to seeds as well, and so there are plenty of sunflower seeds and flax seeds and chia seeds and all kinds of other good sources of a lot of the same nutrients we get from nuts come in seeds.
And somebody had a question about whether you had to grind up the flax seeds.
Yeah, so good question. You do have to grind up the flaxseed. The covering on a flaxseed is one of the hardest compounds that come in fruits and vegetables. So if you eat it whole, it'll pass through you whole for the most part. So either buy them ground and store them in the refrigerator or freezer, or buy them whole and grind them yourself as needed. But you do have to grind flax seeds, unlike some other kinds of seeds.
And flax definitely has a bit of a shelf life. So if you grind them or if you use oils, they can go rancid, within a certain time frame and not taste good. So just be mindful of that. You want to try to keep, not buy huge amounts and keep them around for a long time and then grind them as you use them, probably.
And keep them in the refrigerator or freezer.
And we had, I think it's the Friesens who had a question, who raised their hand. So I'm going to unmute you, Mr. Friesen, and go ahead.
Okay, I have a question on taking cinnamon with protein. Does vegetable protein affect cinnamon as well?
Good question, Mr. Friesen. So just to remind everybody, there is some concern about taking cinnamon because levodopa is a lot like a long chain branched amino acid, and it gets it competes for absorption with some of the amino acids found in protein. So for people who notice a difference, we recommend that they not take Cinemet when they have a lot of protein in their stomach. So either take the Cinemet a half an hour before you eat, or maybe an hour after. Or if you don't have a lot of protein in your meal, then it's not so much of a concern. So there is some reason to believe that the proteins in plant-based proteins might not be as much of a problem because of the somewhat different amino acid composition. However, I think it is still a potential interaction. So what I do is just recommend people experiment. I mean, eat a meal that doesn't have any plant-based protein in it, see how you feel afterwards, and try a meal with some plant-based protein. But ideally, you could also just always try to eat half an hour before you eat, whether it's animal or plant protein, and it should be absorbed pretty well that way. So it is a concern, possibly not quite as much of a concern, but it's difficult to say with certainty.
And we usually say at RVA that we try to space it out, because the other reason to care about taking your medications about 30 minutes, even an hour before you take a meal, is that sometimes the medications can help you with your swallow muscles to be safer when you're swallowing or eating or drinking. And so for patients who have swallow dysfunction, and that can develop, over time with Parkinson's, it's better to get your medicines on board and working well if you're going to be ingesting meals. So we just try to kind of plan around it, and I think it's a nice way to space out your pills as well. So we try to do, if possible, an hour before meals, and hydrate well. Because the other thing that a meal can do, if you have a heavy meal, sometimes your blood goes to your belly to help digest the food, and then you can feel lightheaded sometimes after a heavy meal. And so again, hydration, taking your pills away from the food can sometimes help with all of that.
You could also, sorry to interrupt, but try a protein redistribution diet, where basically you eat most of your protein at your evening meal, so that you're spending the evening relaxing and you're not moving around a lot. So it's not as concerning if the Cinemet doesn't work quite as well. You can Google protein redistribution, but basically just trying to eat most of the protein in your daily diet at the last meal of the day.
So we're certainly not advocating cutting down on protein or eliminating protein. We still need protein, especially as we're aging with the Parkinson's. Somebody asked, does it help to have carbs with Cinemet to improve absorption of Cinemet?
I'm not aware of any evidence that would support that. I don't know how that would actually work. So
yeah, sometimes we tell people to take sometimes like a cracker or bread with their Cinemet if they get nausea from taking Cinemet. Sometimes it helps to settle the stomach a little bit if you have nausea. So maybe that's why you may have heard that, but it's not because it absorbs better. There's a question about nutritional suggestions if your homocysteine level is high.
So if your homocysteine, remember, to back up a little bit, the B vitamins are involved in a number of different processes, and one of them, one of the pathways leads to an increase in homocysteine levels in your body if you're deficient in folate or B12 or pyridoxine. So there are easy recommendations for supplements to improve homocysteine levels. Taking some supplemental B12, usually 1,000 milligrams a day, some folate, 400 a day, and pyridoxine, 25 or so, 10 or 25 a day. You want to not take too much pyridoxine. There can be interactions with some medications, but the first thing I do is just supplement people with B12, and that'll often help the homocysteine. There are some people, however, that even with normal levels of those vitamins still have high levels, and it's tricky. The the metabolism of levodopa of Cinemet also increases your homocysteine. So we used to think that maybe adding COM10 wouldn't improve that, but there was a study that showed that that didn't really make any difference. It's tricky sometimes to decrease high homocysteine levels if the supplements aren't working. If you don't want to take supplements, then just find some kind of supplemental source of B12. There are some, if you're vegan, some vegan sources of pills of B12 that come from bacteria or something. But in general, I just have people supplement. It's one of the few supplements I believe in.
So I think we have a couple more minutes, so maybe we'll take one or two more questions and wrap up here. So quick one or two questions. I've heard that blood or hair tests to check nutrient and vitamin levels exist, I guess. Are these legit, and do you recommend them?
So, good question. Hair tests for nutrient and mineral levels and everything. And there's a lot of controversy around that. Unfortunately, there are a lot of labs out there that run tests that are difficult to prove that they actually are reliable. There are issues with checking. Some doctors, particularly naturopathic doctors, do use hair tests to check levels of things like lithium and heavy metals and things. I don't do it myself. I am not a huge. I don't have enough information for sure to say whether or not they're never useful. I think sometimes they're overused, but I don't use them in my practice.
Nor do I. I think we globally don't really recommend them from our perspective. So I think that we're almost kind of wrapping up here. There's one or two comments about nausea strategies. Domperidone is reasonable. It's not available in this country. I think that's reasonable. And then somebody asked about orange juice for nausea. I myself have not had practice with that. And it does, drinking acidic juices and things with Cinemet sometimes is one of those things where it sometimes can increase the rapidity of absorption, perhaps, or chewing the tablet or drinking it even with a carbonated beverage. But in general, if you're going to do those sorts of things, you should talk to your doctor about that, because it can alter the time of onset, but sometimes even how long it's going to last in your system. So I wouldn't globally, even though people are writing that in here, just be careful with using strategies of taking various liquid forms or making it into liquid formulations of Cinemet. All those things should be discussed probably with your treating doctor. So I think with that, I really think this was a very rich discussion. And I want to thank John so much for taking the time from his East Coast practice to help answer all these questions and give us this lovely presentation. Hopefully the gang found it useful, and if so, you can comment here, and that if you want to have more in-depth discussions about these things. But I really appreciate everyone taking the time, and for PMD Alliance for allowing this opportunity for us to educate you on these important topics. So thank you.
Yes.
Thanks so much, Indu and Andrea and everyone. It's been a pleasure, and I wish all of you success in fighting back against your Parkinson's disease and all the other chronic diseases we are.
And happy lunchtime to those of you who it's lunchtime for. Maybe you can have, this slides made me really hungry, so I kind of want some avocado and some kale right now. So
there you go.
Absolutely. Thank you to our two physicians for volunteering your time and sharing your expertise. And to everyone who couldn't write down all those notes fast enough, we will have the recording up, and all of that link page that Dr. Duda had in his presentation. I'll put the live links in the notes, so then you can just, it makes it easy. You can just click and go straight to the to all those websites that he listed. So give us a couple days to get that up. And like Dr. Subramanian said, if there's other topics, let us know. If there's other, you know, things related to integrative medicine that you want to hear about, so we can start sourcing some experts and putting that together. But yes, thank you for all of you out there for tuning in. And I know I see Dr. Subramanian is still there. So if you liked it, in your little video box, wave like a crazy person. Woo! Oh yeah, okay. I should have done some more, like, you know, big motions, but I think based on those waves, yeah, that's a pretty good visual cue of how well received this was. So thank you again to everyone, and we will stay tuned for our next date. We'll see you in a few months. Thanks.